Whew! Hi there, welcome back to the adventure. Don't caught me off guard. We are going to try something today. I want to show you and share with you what I get and what it's like being on this kayak here in the water. In addition, we're checking out Roque Island, which is a beautiful and unique island that separates Chandler and Englishman Bays. So we'll see what we get into along the way. We'll see what we can explore, and we'll see how this turns out. All right, everybody, thanks for joining the adventure. So right now I am in the middle of Englishman Bay, and I'm crossing over from Roque Island to Roque Island, having left the Roque Bluffs town landing. And I had a kind of stiff easterly wind today, and I thought it would help push me over to Roque Island because I knew later in the day it would shift to the south. But it has shifted to the south, and I'm taking it a little bit on my beam as I make this crossing. Our goal is to make it through some of the islands to get into Roque Harbor. Kind of the last safe protected harbor along the main coast. There are cruisers that come up all summer, and this is kind of their turnaround spot. Much past this point, and the bold coast of Maine really earns its name. This island's really interesting because there's a lot of these little slots that you can kind of slide into, or look back into the crack that goes deeper into the forest. At higher tides, you can kind of park in them. I just love sitting in those spots and that energy and just sort of feeling the energy. Let's see if there are some further up that have a little bit more water to get into. Okay, describing to you what this is like. Being in a sea kayak is like being connected to the ocean. I've described it as like plugging into the water before. You can feel everything. You can feel yourself sliding through the water. You can feel the effect of the wind. You can feel the effect of the swell. And it's hypnotic. It's rhythmic. And I'll come back to that theme, rhythmic, because I think that's another part of kayaking. You're also right off the water. And being that close to the water is a visceral experience. You get splashed in the face. You move through waves. You cut through waves. There's an eagle that just flushed off of this rock. Many times on this channel, I've parked myself next to rocks and just watched the waves splash over the rocks. Or if you watched my Baja episode, you saw me rock gardening and using the boat to be playful and play in those types of environments. It's such a capable vessel with the right skill and the right training to explore something that it's just a gift. As I flesh the eagle again, and he's, or she, is flying out to sea. Bit of a gift here from the last ice age. This Volkswagen-sized boulder sitting on this ledge. It's like it's on a pedestal. It's kind of cool. Hello, Mr. Eagle. Oh, two eagles. Hey, sweethearts. After finding boats, I found a coach, Nate Hansen at Pinniped Kayak. And I know I talk a lot about coaches on this channel, but they've been invaluable for my development and my exploration. In an early training trip, we came out here and did some fog crossing and practiced some other skills. And one of the things we did as we paddled along is came up to this slot. And the water was a little bit higher, and the wave conditions were a little bit bigger, and the waves were breaking into this slot, but there was enough green water to play in. And Nate said, "You want to go in?" And I was petrified, and I said, "Okay." So I popped on the helmet, and with Nate's coaching, really explored my first time navigating tight spaces. And ever since then, I've been a bit hooked to be in a place and have a coach just aware of skill set and opening that opportunity and saying, "Yeah, you want to try that? We can set that up." Sparked that. So thank you, Nate. Thank you for that experience. I lost my fuzzy caterpillar on my microphone, so I'm going to do a little bit here before I get out to the wind. Roque Island. What's going on with Roque Island? Well, it's an interesting island, and it's got a lot of history. It's privately owned, and it's an enormous island. I think the perimeter is something like 10 miles, but it's also a collection of islands in this archipelago. There's also just this beautiful necklace of islands that sweeps the southeast side of Roque Island that is honestly some of my favorite places to paddle. Some of my favorite islands that I've been to are along this line. And I know I say my favorite island a lot, but these are actually really my favorites. If I have friends up in this area who are coming to visit, I take them to these islands because they're magical. They're not easy to get to. There's a lot of conditions that can make them really challenging, but well worth it on the right day. Roque Island itself, back in like the 1780s, and first of all, I'm not Google, so the history part of this, go to Google for that. I'm going to show you this beautiful place, which I don't think Google can do yet. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a history. But go check out Google if you want more of this history. Back in like the 1780s, someone purchased the island, and for like 50 years, really focused on building ships. Using the timber on the island and the protected harbors and building schooners. And that gentleman, Mr. Peabody, passed the islands, I should say, onto his daughter, who married a super wealthy Bostonian at the time, who the family that would later go to start the Gardner Museum of Fine Art in Boston. It's a private island, and I'm sure many people in that family come out and use it. I don't know all the logistics of it, but there's caretakers on the island. There's a couple of homesteads on the island. It's one of the, it's the longest continuous salt farm in Maine. It also has one of the longest sand beaches in the area, and we'll get into that in a little bit, and I'll show you a little bit as we get into Roque Harbor. But a really beautiful, long, white crescent sand beach that we just don't have stuff like that. It's a pretty special place. All right, well, let's continue around the exposed side of Bar Island here, the south side of Bar Island. I'm not going to worry about my microphone and talking to camera unless I find an easy place to get off. I know I'll have some spots once I get around, but it might be a little video montage for you. Bar Island. Hope you enjoy. Pretty low energy slot here. Let's see what this looks like. Cool. Yeah. It's one of the things that just continues to get me excited. I'm finding these quiet spots. A sea kayak. You know, doing what other boats can't do. Outside of the feeling of being on the water, the physical feeling, there's an emotional feeling. It's a psychological feeling. And I'm going to borrow a phrase from a very talented YouTuber, Wild Bear, who shares when she goes hiking that, you know, at least for pockets of her week, she or we get to be exceptional, we get to be extraordinary, we get to be explorers. And I love that idea, that for those moments when I'm on the water, I get to have that wonder, I get to have that exploration, I get to have that sense of awe and joy. And when you tie that into what this boat feels like, and watching the water and the waves and experiencing wildlife and seeing these rugged places, it's hard not to let it sink into your body. And maybe that's the magic. So I was trying to conceive of this episode. I love that idea of the magic of being on the water because I do feel it's magical. And I went to a lot of sensory things of, you know, the boat moving through the water and with the water, and those are all real. But maybe the real magic is the door that this boat allows me to step through and allows me to explore and allows me to feel. The rocks all of a sudden changed on this side of Lakeman Island to this ruddy pink, whereas the other side was black and gray and jagged. We now got some pink rocks. Can you make these pinnacles out? It's a cut of water that goes behind these back to this really jagged, gray, harsh rock. Might be starting to see why this island group in this area is some of my favorite. There's just so many unique features and things to explore. And it changes with the days and the tides and the wind and the fog. It looks different every single time I'm out here. And it's just as beautiful as the last time. That might be helmet worthy, friends. Let's go back and look at that. It's a pretty big cut here that disappears into a smaller and smaller cut deep into the rock. Yeah, let's pop the helmet on and see if we can get you in there. What? All right. I'm going to back into this just because I think I'm going to have a better chance of getting a shot with my rear camera than I am with the front camera or holding a camera. We're on the middle of the Maine coast, parked into a little slot, having an adventure. I've tried to describe it a few times today, but when you come into these little slots that are a little bit more protected, they've got their own sound and their own energy. And it's like when you go into church and you think you should whisper. Maybe you should whisper in church. I don't know. If you should whisper in church, then you're doing the right thing. But if you feel the urge to whisper in church, that's a little what this is like. Special magic places. The energy in here, it's palpably different. It's settled. It's like an exhale. Let's see how deep it is. Whoa, it's way deeper than my paddle. I have the urge when I'm in these places to continue to paddle instead of listening to the boat. So I'm just going to listen to the boat. All right, more to explore. I'm going to pop out, get the helmet off. It's one of the reasons why I keep the helmet in my cockpit, just so it's easy to get to. I don't love stuff on my deck. I like to keep the deck of my kayak pretty clean, but keeping the helmet in the cockpit gives me easy access. Okay, Lakeman Island does not suck. That is beautiful. With what action cameras do to horizons, there's probably not a lot of chance you see it, but pretty far in the distance you can see that long white sand beach. I'd be remiss if I didn't spend some time as I'm talking about what this boat feels like in the water and what it can do and the places you can go. If I didn't talk a little bit about at least what I think are some categories that are important to consider of what makes a sea kayak a sea kayak. Now look, everybody's going to have their own opinion. This is not a definitive guide. Go find those resources. I'm just going to give you a couple of the things that I think about are important for this type of boat, for the types of places that we find ourselves in. Okay, the categories to think about. Does the kayak have deck lines? If I'm out of my boat and I need to hold on to my boat, or if I'm with a group of people trying to hold on to a wet, slippery boat while I'm bobbing in the water, or while the boat's bobbing in the water, I'm trying to help someone else, really difficult. Also, if I needed to tow somebody, if we're with a group and I need to tow them, I need a safe and reliable place to clip in. It's also an important consideration that sea kayaks have airtight bulkheads. I have a front hatch and a rear hatch. I also have a day hatch behind my seat that are all sealed compartments, full of air. The hatches are at least still relatively dry on this boat. They can leak a little bit. But the idea is I've got a lot of air in this boat that if I capsize, my cockpit's going to fill up with water. And I've trained on how to get that water out of the cockpit, which we'll talk about in a second. And it's still going to float. It's not going to sink, or it's not going to be so submerged that I have no hope of getting the water out. Use float bags to really seal that air up if you want. I do carry a spare float bag in case I do spring a leak. I can put that float bag in and blow it up, and I've got air. So if my cockpit does fill up with water, I need a way to get the water out. And I think it's really important that sea kayaks, when they're full of water, you can turn them upside down and have them empty towards the rear. That the water will pour out towards the back of the seat when it's upside down. Rear emptying or rear draining kayak. If I didn't have that ability, when I went to drain my kayak, all the water would just go to the bow or the stern, whichever way I guess I lift it up. There are a whole host of considerations about length and characteristics and design of a sea kayak. You know, sea kayaks are typically longer, 12, 13, 14 feet, up to 18 feet. And again, there's so much variation and there's so much reason that you'd get a shorter boat and a longer boat. But they're typically longer than maybe a 9-foot recreational boat. They have an upswept bow and an upswept stern, which allows them to cut through oncoming waves. And then the shape, the hull of the kayak, the chine, hard chine and soft chine, again, all words you could go look up. And I could spend episodes talking about rocker and chine and hard chines and all of these characteristics. And they're all important and they all do something different. But that consideration of, was your boat designed to be in some of the more difficult conditions you're going to find yourself in? Again, not on a day where this harbor looks like a lake, but on days where this harbor or the south side of some of those islands look like a washing machine. So those are some of the characteristics. Not all, it's not a definitive list, but those are some of the characteristics that I'd put into important things in a sea kayak. If you have other thoughts, or if you want to add to the conversation, throw them in the comments below and let me know what you think. What are the important aspects that make a sea kayak a sea kayak? Making our last little bit into Great Sand Beach on Roque Island here in Roque Harbor. This is a private island, and I'm stopping here with the knowledge that the landowners allow visitors to come to the beach, to stay on the beach. There's signs all up and down the beach requesting it, but just grateful that we can come to this unique and beautiful spot. I can show you around. The key here is to follow a wave in, to not surf a wave. They're not really big waves though. Here's my wave. Here I go. Little raccoon maybe coming down to the beach for a snack. What do you think of Roque Beach? Kind of a cool spot, huh? I mentioned it earlier in the day, but I completely forgot to come back to it. And that's the rhythm of kayaking. There's so many rhythms happening. There's the rhythm of the water and the swell and your boat moving through the water, and then there's a rhythm of your paddle strokes. And when it all comes together, there's kind of a zen that comes into it. There's a spruce tree up there growing, you know, Mr. Miyagi bonsai tree style, if any of you get that reference. Does that movie still hold up? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be referencing The Karate Kid. I will tell you what, friends, the bold coast of Maine does not disappoint. I feel like I'm spending more time today looking at nature than I am the camera. Oh well. So from this point, I'm just going to make my way around the southeast arm of Roque Island. I'll meander through the small protected islands, Marsh, Lakeman, and Bar, and then I'll poke back out into Englishman Bay, and then just pick my way back along the shore. I'm totally in one of those Zen states right now. My body feels good, the boat feels good, and I had the cameras off, so I was just paddling. Wasn't really in my head, and yeah, found that state. I've come out of Roque Harbor, and now I'm in Lakeman Harbor between Marsh Island and Lakeman Island, and it feels like a lake in here today. There's a little wavelets on the water, but otherwise it looks like a lake. I'd love to know the words you would use to describe that feeling of being on the water. I used several ideas and terms today, the physical feeling of it as well as the emotional and psychological feeling, but what words come up for you when you think of that? If you're a kayaker or a canoeer or paddleboard, just love spending time on the water, what does that feel like to you? Put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also in the comments, give me your thoughts on some of the universal features that make a sea kayak, if you're a sea kayaker or if you have thoughts on the matter. I don't know how long I'll say it or how many times I'll say it, but I'm just going to keep saying it, of how grateful I am that you're watching this, the comments that I'm getting, the feedback that I'm getting, what people are sharing that is lighting them up, just fuels me to continue. I hope you enjoyed seeing all of the things that this area has to offer that most people don't get to because, well, it's kind of at the edge of Maine and not easy to get to, and these conditions can be tricky. We had a great day for it. I'm going to make my way through Bar Island and Marsh Island here and make my crossing back towards Rope Bluffs. So it'll be an open crossing, which gets a little boring to film and blabber to camera. I don't have great visuals when I'm out there. So this feels like as good a time as any to wrap this one up. I really appreciate you watching. I really hope you enjoyed the things we explored and the things we got into. Can't wait to hear more about your thoughts about the things that I unpacked today and have you add to that conversation. All right, everybody. I hope you have a blast out there and safe paddling. Bye-bye.